Hey, welcome back on the Good Morning Artesia radio show, and we're happy to have back in studio with us Mr. Kirk Irby from Lowell's Pharmacy. Good morning.
Good morning.
Doing well?
I think so. How about you?
We're after this weekend, I think it, at least for me, I think it kind of slows down into a kind of a normal routine. There's not a lot of basketball scheduled between now and the end of the year. There's a couple of holiday tournaments, after Christmas, before New Year's. But we've got the basketball tournament this week. We've got the all-star football games on Saturday. And then we can kind of like kick back and say, okay, we might have a game Tuesday. We might have a game Friday. Got Christmas. And so I think we're good. And I messed up. For some reason, I wrote down all the scores from yesterday's games, and I got the Goddard Carlsbad game backwards, the girls' game score backwards. I thought Goddard had won that game, but it was Carlsbad that did. And I even sent this to Eric Butler for the sports. And then when I previewed the sports report and he said that Carlsbad had won, I said, no, that's not true on my sheet. Then I looked it up and I had it wrong. So we'll get things squared away. So Goddard and Alamogordo play in a girls' game at 8:30. And we'll have the Alamogordo radio announcer calling that game on the video feed. Then Alamogordo plays Carlsbad boys. So I'll let the guys decide if they want to move the cord for the Carlsbad guy or not, or just keep with the Alamogordo guy. And so that's who will be our guest announcer. Then we'll have Ruidoso and Deming girls game, and Joby will call that game for us. And then Deming and Mayamera will play at 1 o'clock in a boys game, and we'll probably have Joby call that game for us.
Of course.
And then we get over to the winner's side, and the first game on the winner's side is at 3, and that's Carlsbad and El Paso Bel Air. So I'll probably let Jerry from Carlsbad Radio voice that. Then we have Hobbs and Rio Rancho, and we'll see if we can figure out how the Hobbs announcer audio we can get into our system. Ty Friend is who's coming over here to do that, and I always like to say, my friend, your friend, Ty Friend. And he's a good announcer. He's also an official. You've probably seen him in the stripes on the basketball court officiating. And they play Rio Rancho. That ought to be a pretty good game, that 4:30 game.
Should be interesting.
Right. And then the boys and girls from Artesia play. The girls beat Deming last night, 57-52. They'll play Riverside out of El Paso at 5:30. And then the boys won over Mayamera, 71-30, and they play Los Lunas, who we just played in football here last weekend. And that'll be the 7:30 game tonight. So that's our schedule for the basketball tournament. So, hey, I'm sure you've had at least one or two questions about Omicron, or as the president called it, Omnicron. Here's my question is, if we were just told about it on Friday after Thanksgiving.
Correct, yeah.
And the South African medical folks were the ones that notified the world, hey, here's what we've discovered. How are we already able to test for it so quickly around the world and in this country?
And that's a good question, and I don't know really how the testing part works. But it came along pretty quick. I actually remember seeing an interview with this doctor from South Africa, and she was talking about a couple of different kind of symptoms that she was noticing in people that had actually already been vaccinated and were showing up to just looks like what we've already vaccinated for. And apparently they had some kind of way of testing down there and found out that it was a different variant. And then since then, I have seen a report that there were 2 different cases from the Netherlands that had the same variant that were taken. Those samples were taken like 2 or 3 days before the South African report. So you're looking at different spots on the globe that are coming up with the same variant at the same time, which is really interesting.
Right, because there are, they're doing this contact tracing. I think we've pretty good contact tracing set up across the country. It probably varies from place to place, but it's probably fairly robust. And so did the people in the Netherlands, did they travel to Africa, or did they come in contact with somebody that traveled from Africa? I think there was an Egyptian case that they couldn't find a African connection to, and now it's popping up in the United States. California, a number of other states have now started to report some cases of it here. But I think in those cases here in the States, I think they are tracing it back to people that did travel to and from Africa.
That is my understanding, at least for what's in the United States. And it's just is interesting to see the kind of political football that's being played out there, and the president locking down travel from South Africa, and original reports made it sound like this variant was so much worse than the other variants, but then you step back and you look at what the actual symptoms and transmissibility that's being reported is, and does seem to be as contagious or more contagious than the Delta variant, but then the symptoms really are not very severe at all. It seems to have a good ability about what they're calling getting around the vaccination defense, and are getting through it. I'm not really sure how.
What the technical term is, yeah.
Yeah, it's really funny how they come up with some of these terms, but but it is seemed to be able to infect the people that have already been vaccinated, but even the people that are not been vaccinated, it's not that severe, and the people that have been vaccinated that still catch the disease are even less affected. And it's just more of how it's being reported, and it's causing a lot of scare out there that I think is unnecessary. Once you step back and actually look at what this variant's actually doing or showing, it just doesn't seem to be that bad.
It's interesting, because that's basically what we're seeing now, and I think even that doctor in South Africa has been surprised at the way it's been reported. In the Western media predominantly, but you're right. The reaction to it has been very, very interesting in all of that. Can you stick around for a little bit? We've got breakfast. McDonald's picked up some sandwiches from McDonald's this morning, and
sounds good.
And there weren't a lot of folks in the drive-thru this morning like I normally see when I go over there on a Friday morning. Is there something going on out of town that I don't know about that people have left?
That's a good question.
We had an excuse for last weekend between Thanksgiving and the football game going on in Los Lunas last weekend, but it did seem a little bit different. But I'm kind of curious about some things, and I want to talk to you about how we're treating symptoms that people get from either COVID or flus or cold or stuff like that, if you've got time to talk about that. Kirk Irby is with us from Lowell's Pharmacy here in Artesia. We invite you to stick around. We'll be back on the other side of the news.